Hello and welcome to another episode of AI Security Ops with Black Hills Information Security. We have our illustrious panel of guests as usual. We have Brian Furman, Derek Banks, and Bronwyn Aker with us. And we have a very special guest with us today, introducing Daniel Miessler. Welcome, Daniel.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
As usual, this podcast is brought to you by Black Hills Information Security. If you are interested in getting an AI security assessment for any of your locally deployed models or implementations, please feel free to reach out to us. Today, however, we are going to be speaking with Daniel and asking him about his interest in AI and all things AI that he has been doing in recent history. And many of you out there, you listeners and followers of artificial intelligence, and particularly artificial intelligence and the cybersecurity field, have probably encountered Daniel because he's been very active in the field and is pretty widely published. And I know Daniel does a lot of presentations as well. So without further ado, there's a couple of things we'd like to ask you, Daniel, but I think first of all, maybe a little bit of foundational story and a little bit of background. And, how did you, Daniel, become interested in artificial intelligence and make the pivot into this area?
Yeah, I would say I've been interested in like public tech for, I don't know, I guess for a long time, for forever. I can't really remember when that started, but in like 2014 or something, I started thinking about like where was the future of tech, and at the time I was thinking in terms of IoT and artificial intelligence, or I think I was calling it synthetic intelligence at the time because it's not really artificial. It's just different.
Yeah.
Kind of like I don't want to be like specious against things that aren't human. If it's going to actually have intelligence, which I think it does. Although it doesn't have consciousness. And then in 2016, I wrote a short little kind of crappy book. It had good ideas, but the book itself was kind of bad. But you could read it in like 45 minutes. And I made a whole bunch of predictions there. And then in 2018, I ended up going to Apple to work in a security department that was focused on ML. So it was machine learning AI stuff for applying to security. And in 2022, I went independent with unsupervised learning, and I've been going crazy with it ever since then. Because a few months right after that is when ChatGPT came out.
Yeah. Right.
And
so
everything went crazy.
Yeah, I mean, so we've, from our perspective, been following the field of AI and LLMs, and in fact, just a little bit of background here. Brian here has actually got a PhD in data science, and Derek above me has a nice master's degree in data science, and we've all been very interested in artificial intelligence, as well as cybersecurity and the intersection thereof. And I think we're living in really, really interesting times. And reading kind of your perspective. I'll tell you what, I'll give the others time to chime in here in just a minute, but what really interested me in what you started publishing is that you started very, very early on pushing the human element and making sure that it was human-centric. And I love the way that you approached that because I think a lot of us, as we saw, the LLMs really start to take hold 21, 22, that period, and start to grow and encroach in knowledge workers' field, that human element was like the big fear. I think that's been a persistent theme and going on. So, and that's when I personally, and I think everybody on the panel here also encountered Fabric, which I love the way that, for me, Fabric became just this really beautiful resource for prompt engineering, and I just love the way that you put that out there with all the templates and let that sort of organically grow. So we'll segue into that, but I'm going to say, if you could talk a little bit about Fabric and the inspiration and that human-centric aspect, that would be really great.
Yeah, that's cool that you got Brian there. I'm curious what Brian thinks about the transition from like the original ML work to whatever this is that we have now, and like what your position is on that. But yeah, I would say Fabric is very much. I appreciate your comments about the human thing. To me, like we're a planet of humans and we have human problems. I've always thought that like the liberal arts are kind of the point, and science and tech is like the backdrop that like accelerates that. Or I feel like that's how it should work. Is that science and tech should lift what we're trying to do on the liberal arts side, which is, you know, being creative, interacting, having conversations, you know, being human. So I view all tech as, and I try to not even think of AI as special. It is special as an instance, but to me, it's just tech. And so therefore it's a tool. Therefore it should be used to magnify something that matters. What matters? Human things, right? So Fabric, I put that together basically exactly oriented in that direction. The patterns are named according to problems. What problems? Problems we have all the time. I need a summary of this. Give me some ideas. You know, help me write this report or whatever. So again, it's kind of sending the tech to the background and bringing the problems forward, the everyday things that humans need to do.
Yeah, I really, really resonated with that approach personally, and I think for some of us, Fabric became kind of our introduction into the idea that the patterns were very centric and very important to get LLMs to do reasonable things for us. I mean, intelligible things for us. But for me, they were also kind of a bit of an accelerant into understanding that it takes a lot more detail on the front end of prompting these LLMs to get the simulated digital reasoning to do something much more productive for you. And I found that to be really useful. Anybody else got a question around that?
I got a quick comment on that real quick. So the further back you go towards like 2023, and I would say, you know, before that, obviously, but the more the format of the prompt mattered, right? There was a whole bunch of stuff where like, oh, XML is way better, or you should do it in Markdown or whatever. I did it in Markdown because it's human readable. So I continue to believe, and this is the structure around the whole Fabric thing, the most important skill is actually a clear explanation of intent. It is like the most important thing. So if you think of like, the way I break everything down is like thought and ideas are core, the central to human experience. This is number one. To me, kind of like coming up from that is like maybe text. I love text. This is why I'm religious about NeoVim. I feel like the manipulation of text is like magic. And I've always felt that way. And then I'm like, AI happens and I'm like, wait a minute, ideas and text, what happens if you combine them? It turns into a prompt.
Yeah.
So everyone's like prompt engineering. Nope. Idea engineering, text engineering, intent engineering. So as things move through 23, 24, 25, the format of the prompt actually doesn't matter as much because the models are better at just like taking whatever. They're just extracting the intent out of it. It doesn't really matter what the format is as much. I think there are still some nuances there. But what I try to tell people is have your thought super clear. This is why I love writing so much, because writing is thinking.
Yeah.
Right? The clearer your thoughts are, the easier it is to write them down. So if you practice writing, you're practicing thinking. So I see that and AI and prompting as all being linked together. So if you're going to build some giant application, I believe the future of doing that is like Minority Report. You have this giant wall screen. What are you basically doing? You're basically being interviewed by an AI, which is getting you to describe in excruciating detail how you want this thing to work and why and what problem you're trying to solve. And the better you can articulate that, the better the app's going to be. That's why the vibe coding is such a problem, is because people don't know exactly what they're trying to do. And they're just like, nah, do something. And like, that's
Right.
when
They're
it
just
falls
sort of
apart.
throwing
Well,
spaghetti at the
yeah,
wall and seeing
that
what
Yeah.
that's
sticks.
exactly what I just did. So I usually start each project now with Fabric and an improved prompt that I kind of made from the improved prompt that exists there. Like I modified it a bit. And then I usually take an iteration or two to refine that prompt even further. And then here recently, I did exactly what you're describing. I played software engineer, like senior software engineer, and made Claude my coder, and was very specific in what I wanted. I want you to store this in SQLite. I want the tables to look like this. I want and so I ended up with a database driven cyber threat intelligence tracker that I ended up putting on GitHub because I was so impressed with it. I was like, man, this
Oh,
really
nice.
worked out pretty well, right? I mean, it's a proof of
That's
concept.
very cool.
And so that's, I think, for like, I've been following what you've been doing, and I kind of like refine that process from like what you just described.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did.
And there's
yeah,
I'll
go
just
ahead,
insert
Brandon.
real quick. There's people are calling it spec coding instead of vibe coding.
Spec coding. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Hmm.
like I said, it was like if you read my prompt, and in fact, we did a workshop and we put the prompt in there just like, to describe to people, this is how I did it. And the prompt is very specific and this is exactly what I want. And Claude, I mean, it nailed it out of the gate.
Yeah. Imagine like a super senior engineer who already knows how to do every single step themselves, which I would say I'm like a 60% engineer. I'm like not like a true dev engineer. I never have been. My ideas have always been strong, but I've always been a little bit crap at the coding of them.
I feel your pain.
But I can at least pick my tech. I could pick my spec. I could pick my I could write a PRD that says I want it done exactly like this.
Yeah.
And when you see really advanced developers use this, that's exactly what they do. They literally do what they would do if they spent the time. And then now the Claude Code is just writing the implementation.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it's a really, really good topic because it comes down to the quality that you're putting up front to the development of that spec. And I have found very similar experiences. The better I do at describing the way I want that thing architected, the tool just does a much, much higher quality result on the back end. I just want to make one comment before I hand it over, because I know Bronwyn has a question. I'm pretty sure Brian does too. But the term prompt engineering, I really don't like it. Would you comment on that, Daniel?
Yeah, I don't like the reason I don't like it either is because it's focusing too much on kind of prompt engineering from 2023, which is, hey, make sure you have the little trick in there, which is like, if you get this wrong, we'll lose $2. Like there was a whole bunch of tricks that actually worked, but those are artifacts of like a problem with the model, right? And as those start coming out, those tricks start to actually be pollution. But even more so, the bigger problem is that they're getting away from the core thing. It's teaching people that there are tricks when actually you shouldn't be thinking tricks. You should be thinking clarity of thought and clarity of communication of intent.
Perfect. I love that. Bronwyn, I believe you have a question.
Well, actually, I was going to chime in, basically building on what Daniel just said. My experience has been, and my belief is that a lot of people right now are using AI badly, because I think that it has the opportunity to free us from the burden of having to memorize everything, all of this information, all of this data. And now we have the ability to focus on the critical thinking, on figuring out what are the right questions that I need to ask. And I'm wonderfully blessed. I have a roommate who does not come from a technology background. And so he's had the opportunity to ride along this whole AI thing as I've been diving deeper and deeper. And right now his tool of preference is Perplexity, because he's able to use it. He's a retired veteran, and he's wrangling with the VA, and so figuring out the morass of regulations to get benefits, it AI has been so valuable, and he's using it right. I mean, I remember years ago reading a science fiction novel where new technology came in and people were able to get these cybernetic implants. So now all of a sudden, Matrix, like, everyone had the ability to access the data, access the information, and now on this large scale, educators were able to shift their emphasis. And I think that's where we need to put more emphasis, is on the critical thinking on how to use it. And I think that's where we're going to see a lot of positive returns.
That
Yeah,
emphasis on the
agree.
other syllable, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So Derek and I. So I want to roll back a couple of years. Derek and I developed a class on artificial intelligence fundamentals, and we were teaching it for Anti-Siphon Training, which is a training company that Black Hills started up a few years back. And Derek and I came at it from a very much fundamentals, data science, machine learning perspective, and we did a whole lot of work in the space of basic classification models, basic neural networks, a whole lot of work that was short of natural language processing and short of the frontier models that we're seeing out here today, because we felt very strongly at the time that those in the cybersecurity industry needed to understand more about the fundamentals that went into the technology before they could really start running with natural language processing. And now we've got Brian on board as well, who's working with us on course development material. So we're real eggheads on this, and we come at it from that perspective. But I think as we went through our maturity cycle with the larger and larger models, and realized just how capable the simulated digital reasoning, which is kind of the term I like to use for it, has become, we became converts over to this sort of idea that you can nearly make these large language models do any task you want. It's just all in the text construction that you put in on the front end. So I wonder what you think about that idea, first of all, about teaching the fundamentals and then moving forward from there. And I think, Daniel, you also might have a question or two for Brian and Derek, who have more formal education here on the machine learning side. So make a comment in that area, if you would.
Yeah. So I've got a couple of things that I wish I had learned more when I was a kid. One is I wish I spoke math. I saw somebody a couple of years ago. They were streaming. He's actually famous in security as well. What's that guy's name?
Schneier? Schneier?
No. He's a younger guy. He's like kind of crazy, but super smart. And he like hacked something. I forget. But anyway, he's like, hey, I'm going to write an LLM from scratch. It was not Kaparthi. It's another guy, but I'm going to write a LLM from scratch. And he starts speaking to the LLM. Well, he wasn't like prompting. I forget what he was doing. But in the course of conversation where he was saying English sentences, he was referring to math ideas. He was just referring casually to really advanced math. And I realized it was just part of his vocabulary. And I was like horribly jealous. So I've been trying to learn a lot more math. So I forgot a piece of my sort of kind of origin here was before I went to Apple, because I was joining an ML team full of PhDs, I'm like, and I'm bad at math. So I went and did Andrew Ng's course, start to finish. It was like 20 little pieces, and it was heavy math. It turns out the math wasn't as intimidating because the matrix multiplication is not that bad if you break it open. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I saw a thing saying it was actually addition instead of multiplication, but I don't think that really matters. But anyway, I think it is important to go all the way back to math. Max Tegmark had a book called The Mathematical Universe, where he has a premise that just everything is math underneath.
Yeah.
And I found that really attractive as well. But I'm currently reading a book called The Mathematica or something like that. But I want to understand the world at this deep, deep fundamental level. And I feel like it's math under there. And then to me, machine learning and AI, I find it interesting because it's figuring out the nature of the world. How is it doing that? Like, a separate question of how are humans doing that? We're approximating that in some sort of way. But the whole idea of climbing the hill, like reducing the cost function, I am enamored with that. And I do think people should understand the core concept.
So now you're speaking math, because you just
Yeah.
said cost function.
Well, it's
right?
Yeah.
funny.
So, but
it-
I feel like you
it's-
said math enough times where Dr. Fairman needs to like weigh in.
Well, and I want Brian.
We've
to jump
invoked
in on
him.
this. But Brian and I are very academic on this side of the field of data science. I didn't go out and get the degree because I'm a lot older than Brian, and doesn't mean I couldn't go out and get another degree. But my interest comes from the fact that I've got a bachelor's degree in mathematics. So, and it was a long time ago, and I've got a postgraduate degree in computer science as well. But so I came at it from the other side, if you like. That I did have that deep mathematical background, and I find myself wanting to refresh that background, especially the deep linear algebra side of mathematics, because I think it is kind of fundamentally important. I spent a lot of time understanding, refamiliarizing myself and understanding tokenization and the vectors involved in the neural networks, so I could see what's going on there. So, but Brian's got a much fresher perspective because he's just actually finished the what is invariably a political process of navigating a PhD. So, Brian, questions and comments and thoughts from you, sir.
One of the things that you had mentioned a couple times that really I think resonates with me, and kind of what really sparked my interest in artificial intelligence originally, is this idea of trying to get computers and other systems to emulate the way that we view the world, interact with the world, the way that we reason, and not just us as humans, because that's another thing you mentioned that I really love too. It's not limited to just people, right? And that's one of the problems with some of the definitions I have for AIs. They usually talk about just human reasoning. It's like, well, it doesn't have to be just people. I mean, obviously, I don't know how a dog or a cat actually thinks because I'm not a dog or a cat, but we can look at things like swarm theory, for instance, with birds and other these large groups where none of them know what every other one is doing, but they know what the ones around them are doing, and based upon that behavior, they can make their decisions. So trying to emulate these things we see in nature. But going back to the human aspect of it, we have these things that seem so easy for us to do, right? It's so easy for us to think through things, to look around, to see things and kind of pull out conclusions from that very quickly. But getting computers to do that in an effective and repeatable way is certainly it's much more challenging, and it's something that people have been working on for a very long time now. I mean, neural networks have been around since the 60s, and now we're within the last couple of years especially really leveraging these to try to kind of emulate some of this reasoning process. And so that's just some of the things that I think are just really fascinating about the field in general, is just trying to get that, just trying to make it do what we can do, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. I love what you're saying there. The way I see that is like there are universal things. And I'm curious how humans are just an instance of a thing dealing with a universal thing. So the thing is challenge, okay, capabilities, applying capabilities to challenge, and like it's an algorithm. Right? It's like, and a dog does that. I guess the other thing would be like goals. So like you're trying to pursue something, and you're moving through this environment. And each individual small thing could be like a challenge or a problem or whatever. But yeah, I love thinking about in some distant universe, there are certain things that are universal, right? It's like there is a substrate that they are living inside of. If they're at some level of consciousness, maybe they have goals, and you have to pursue goals with the capabilities that you have. These things seem fairly universal, and I love the fact that they are universal. And we could try to get to the kernel of it, and then just look at instances of, okay, this is how transformers seem to handle it. This is how humans seem to handle it. Dogs, cats, dolphins, whatever.
One of the things I don't know if the other guys are aware of is that I participated in that first class that you taught on Fabric.
Oh, cool.
Remember? I mean, that seems like ancient history now.
Yeah, the augmented class. Yeah.
Yes. And I was just floored by you were able to bring order out of chaos. That was one of the things that I appreciated very much is the methodology, and especially a lot of people, they're not going to know to normal people can't break things down and turn them into processes. And it's something that I have done more than once. And so I really appreciated that. And I was so glad when you open sourced it. That was a brilliant move on your part. And I'm eternally grateful. And I just wanted to tell you since you're here.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like the concept is held up fairly well, because wasn't it mostly a mapping system of like how to get your human tasks that you want to do and use AI to help you with them? Like that was the fundamental idea. Yeah.
And, well, you've said over and over again, the human focus is very much where your headspace is in terms of being able to utilize the tools to the best advantage for humans. And
Yeah.
that was consistent from the augmented course. What was that, 2023, or it was a while ago.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, definitely not 22, 23. Must have been the end of 23.
Yeah. And again, that focus on what is a problem that you're trying to solve, and here's a framework of how to get the most bang for your buck from these tools to help you solve the problem. So
Yeah.
that was, and Fabric is still doing that, which is why it's so wonderful, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Let's turn the focus over to cybersecurity for a minute, because we've talked a lot about, we talked about Fabric, we talked about tooling, we talked about some AI fundamentals, and some concerns around natural language processing. But cybersecurity is the industry we're all in, even though we've taken a very large detour, especially this group, down the AI path, and trying to understand it. So I guess the first question is, how concerned do security professionals need to be about the risks around particularly large language models and the deployment of large language models in individual organizations, and or the usage of some of these frontier models via various software API interfaces? And then I guess a follow-on question, which is I think probably the bigger question, is should us cybersecurity professionals be worried about our future jobs? From that knowledge worker perspective with the advances of AI, or should we be perhaps embracing it in a different way? So let's go with risks first.
Yeah, risks. I would say there's significant risk. I would say generally the reason there's so much risk is because so much more is being created. If you suddenly have millions of people, potentially tens or hundreds of millions of people making things, and they are not engineers in the civil engineer type, nomenclature, where if you have people designing bridges who didn't go to school to design bridges, you got to be careful when you drive over them. So, and that's the same thing with like building all these applications, because it's pretty easy to vibe code, not like spec code, but purely vibe code a fully working web application. And guess what? You could tell an AI to write a login form and make it so people can log in.
Yeah.
It'll probably use TLS, but how's it going to store the credentials? Like, how are they going to make passwords? Like, it could really get it wrong. And if you have hundreds of millions of people building that kind of stuff, and you have API keys, and just like a whole lot of garbage is being created right now as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's a long-term problem. I think it's more of a short-term problem, but it is building a lot of cruft that's going to have to be cleaned up on the internet. So I would say that's kind of the number one risk. I would say there's lots of independent tactical risks that are going to come from this. Like, we're going to have outages, we're going to have breaches, we're going to have whatever. But I don't think they really matter that much. The amount of banking fraud that exists day to day, how many millions of dollars are being stolen day to day in banking, across the infrastructure that we use every day, that's just kind of common, is extraordinary. It's massive, millions of dollars being lost every day. Guess what? Banks work fine. Like, the whole structure still works. Like, I don't think that's too much of an issue. As far as jobs, though, I am much more worried about jobs, just because I think for most people, the tasks that people do to get paid on a daily basis are starting to move below the bar of what AI can do.
Yeah.
And this is not a problem of, in my mind, it's not a problem of people being bad at their jobs or AI being good. It's just a matter that those thresholds are switching.
It's a cost-benefit analysis.
Yeah, and so here's the best way to think about this, in my opinion, is just imagine that all creators of any company suddenly became aliens, and they have 10,000 heads and brains. So they're very wide. They have 10,000 heads and brains, and that's how they walk around the world. And they have 40,000 arms and hands. Except for the 40,000 arms and hands can reach into computers, and also it could pick up things and move things or whatever. Well, guess what? They wouldn't hire any employees.
Yeah.
If you go back to the very beginning, a founder would just do the work.
Yeah.
Founders literally hire employees because they can't physically do the work themselves. So if they could just give 5 of their heads, the admin job, and 5 of their heads the engineer job, and keep extending that for all the other heads that they have, they would be one-person shops.
Right.
And that is a natural state for that to happen. That is natural. So it's almost like what we have now with our current economy that's based on work is kind of an unnatural state. It's just what happened because people can't do all the work. So AI and tech in general and automation in general is simply enabling those founders to not have employees anymore. So this is why I'm so obsessed with the human focus and human 3.0, because all that disappears. Now the question is, what are we going to talk about on this call when all the work can be done by these other agents? We could still talk about the books we want to write. We could talk about the worlds we want to create for each other. We could talk about the communities we want to build. Friendships, coffee, love, like all these things don't require that we have a 9-to-5 day job.
Yeah.
I think you had said in a previous blog post or maybe like a podcast, the ideal number of employees for a company is 0. Like that.
Yeah.
That's really, if you could get by with 0 employees, and that's what the company would do, right?
Well, so what we're saying is, we are seeing a process of the economic system being upended, right?
Yes.
So clearly, that's a concern that we're going to have to wrestle with, because I don't think we can put the genie back in the bottle at this point.
Well, no, I think that the current state of models is already there, where a lot of what people do, like you're saying, day to day, like I think that if you glue it together in the right way, the models themselves are already capable enough to replace.
So that's the aspect I want to zoom in on. Right?
Yes.
It's just the trust factor, because right now, especially in information security, but I'm sure other places, people are still like, oh yeah, but what about hallucinations? Which in my opinion, anecdotally, have really diminished in the frontier models over the last year or so, right?
Yes.
But then, my retort to that is, what about hallucinations? Like, well, have you ever had a coworker who's wrong? I mean,
Right.
of course,
Yeah.
right? And so just because it's occasionally wrong doesn't, in my opinion, discount what it can do, right?
Yeah, I agree.
I still do believe human in the loop, but I'm with you. If I'm a web app penetration tester and I can get an AI to do 50% of my job, I'm twice as good as the next person, right? And so
Yep.
that's where I think we'll see job loss is folks who aren't able to compete with people who are using AI in a very efficient manner.
So that's where I want to step in, right? Because right now we're at this juncture where, yes, we are seeing some autonomy begin to develop. We are seeing the fledgling agentic space start to take off, where the output of AIs actually can have actions. They can even go as far as kinetic actions and so forth. But on the input side of the equation, where we are seeing competitive advantage, from my viewpoint, is people that can very, very creatively create the specs, right? Create the appropriate context. Are we in a space where we are on the edge of pivoting into autonomy on the input side where the human is not needed, is the real question I think that we need to get at?
It depends on the task. I would say if you're trying to replace a really, really creative movie or script or comic or something that's like pinnacle human creativity, we're not there yet. We're also not at the point yet of going from Newtonian physics to Einsteinian physics, right? So for Einstein to say, hey, what if it's just like you have a rubber sheet and you drop a bowling ball on it, and the bending of the sheet is actually the way gravity works. That's not a thing that AI can do yet. And there's smaller versions of that we all do occasionally where we're really creative at work, right? And I think those are the harder things to get to. The problem is the AI will just keep moving up through there. And the really difficult thing is that, let's say that bar is here. When AI moves up and hits it, there's no reason it's going to stop there. Because being 5 levels above that is kind of arbitrary, I think. It's likely to be arbitrary. And who knows where it'll stop at what point. But there's not a magical human level that it's going to be hard to pass.
Yeah, so I struggle with this too. This very quickly delves into the space of deep philosophical debate, where we start to explore the areas of, our large language frontier models verging on the space of being sentient. Is it really simulated digital reasoning anymore, or has it become its own form of reasoning and
sentience
capability?
is not the same thing as intelligence or consciousness, right? Like I think.
Yeah, I consider them very different axes. I definitely think they are reasoning, and I don't think they're anywhere close to sentience as far as I could tell.
Yeah, and
that's my viewpoint as well, Daniel. I think you have to work with them for quite a period of time to come to that place. Because I do think there's a lot of FUD, frankly, out there, right? There's this sort of fear, uncertainty, doubt. People don't know what is possible, even because they haven't explored the area enough. They just know the media sound bites.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
One of the reasons that Joff and I wrote that foundations class was we were trying to, like, I could tell when I would talk to folks, especially in information security, they would make comments, and I could tell they didn't really understand like what the thing even really was. Like, what is a large language model?
So let's hit a couple more questions. We've actually taken a pretty good amount of Daniel's time, so I want to be respectful of your
And
time.
thank you so much again.
Yeah, no problem.
And if I haven't said this already, thank you for sec lists too. That's really came in handy in my life.
That was a great. And I have one at some point. I hope to meet you in person and tell you some of the more interesting things we've done with sec lists. But that's a conversation not for a podcast. there's a couple of last questions I think I have here, and that is we've seen recent press from Sam Altman on the impending release of GPT-5, and we've seen some very concerning statements from him about its extraordinary capability. And related to that question is, where do you, given that we're in, mid-late summer of 2025, I kind of feel like we're at this inflection point where things are going to start accelerating even more. That's my personal view. But what do you see? What do you see coming for us late this year and into 26 as we see these models take that very next step in AKA GPT-5 and companions?
Yeah, great question. So I think a lot of the benefit that's going to come, or a lot of the power that we're about to see, is not actually from model improvement. I think model improvement helps a lot. Like, the smarter the model it is, the more it can mess with, it can handle bad prompting and bad scaffolding. But the benefit's actually going to come from the scaffolding. Or I think what you said, Derek, glue or plumbing. I call it scaffolding. I call it glue, plumbing, wiring. It's actually just the stitching together of these models into a working system. Because the way humans work, right, we have to have a working memory. We have to be able to recall old tasks we learned back in college with arithmetic. We have to also remember what our manager said yesterday about how the project is different. And this is a problem we currently have, is that whole structure is kind of still kludgy right now. So you couldn't actually hire an AI to do any one of our jobs, because it would just kind of lose the plot after a couple of weeks or even a couple of hours. It would lose the plot and it would turn into a very bad employee. So that progress there is actually, I think, what most AI companies are going to be working on. Progress on the stitching and the plumbing is actually what's going to get us, in my opinion, to AGI, which is the ability to replace a knowledge worker. That's the definition I use.
Yeah.
Because it'll be general enough to do the work of most knowledge workers. So I think model advancements is not where it's at, in my opinion. I think it's scaffolding advancements. And I think companies are just now starting to deploy scaffolding, and companies are just now starting to work on scaffolding-based AI worker replacements. And that's what's going to be your developer and your project manager and your planner and your marketer. You're literally just going to hire one of these things, and you're going to send it to onboarding on Monday, just like other employees.
Yeah.
And it's going to go read all the docs and come back and say, okay, I understand. What do you want me to do? It's going to show up in Slack. It's going to show up to team meetings. Like that's what I see happening, not because of models, but because of scaffolding.
Right, it'll be a peer, and I think you're absolutely right, and it kind of addresses my earlier question of discrete models and discrete natural language prompting is one thing, putting it all together into a cohesive system is still occurring, and I think you're right on target. Any final short questions from anybody before we let Daniel go?
What will it take for us to get you to Wild West Hackin' Fest?
Not too much, actually. not too much.
We would love to have you there. This year, I believe, is a wash because of scheduling conflicts. But what we've got Denver in February, and of course,
which
October
everybody wants to go to
next
Denver in February.
year.
Actually, wasn't that
yourself.
bad this past year. It was nice.
Actually, Denver in February. Let's talk about that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's the second week. Well, we can always look it up.
It's early in February. I'll confirm the dates and ship them to you, and I'll probably send an email that will connect you with the people organizing it, so we can make sure that you get signed up, because that would be so awesome.
Okay.
And I know that I'm doing an AI teach with Derek probably at that event, and I'm also doing an AI teach in Vegas like the week before. So February is going to be busy next year for me. But anyway, that all aside, thank you so much, Daniel, for being here today. it was a pleasure having you, and I hope we can see you again on the show sometime.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Appreciate
Thanks.
it.
Thank you so
Take care.
much. Appreciate it.
All right, hit the button, Brian.